Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.
Okay, so the U.S. government shutdown, it's really moved beyond just being about fiscal debates in D.C., hasn't it?
It absolutely has.
Mm.
We're now looking at a really critical deadline, a resource deadline, for millions of American families, people who depend on core federal food assistance.
Yeah, we're talking what, just a matter of days potentially before the whole funding mechanism just breaks down?
It's a very, very serious situation.
Mm.
You're watching a political fight, an impasse, translate directly into what could be a major hunger crisis.
Hmm.
And it's specifically hitting SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and WIC.
WIC, right, for women, infants, and children.
Exactly.
So our mission today, let's do a deep dive. We'll use the sources he sent over, really pull out the key details, like how did a budget fight spiral so fast into threatening essential food aid?
Yeah, and maybe the biggest question is what tools or resources actually exist right now? Is there anything to stop this huge benefits gap from opening up on November 1st?
That seems to be the core of it, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and the paradox, which I think we need to unpack, is that the administration might actually have the money, the means to prevent this,
Hmm.
but the political will, that seems to be missing. So it starts to look like a policy choice, really, just kind of dressed up as an administrative emergency.
Okay, let's start with those administrative mechanics then, because that's really setting the deadline. October benefits were okay, right? Those funds were already out the door.
Correct. The real alarm for November started around October 10th.
What happened then?
That's when the USDA basically told states, hold your S&P files. Don't send them to the EBT vendors until we tell you otherwise. Until further notice was the phrase.
So for anyone listening who doesn't track this stuff closely, it's not like the bank account suddenly hit zero.
No, not exactly. It's more like the government just paused the crucial instruction. Think of it like stopping the wire transfer that tells the EBT card systems, okay, release the funds on the 1st.
Ah, so it's an administrative choke point.
Precisely. By stopping that one internal communication, they basically halted the whole process for November benefits.
And the scale of what's hanging in the balance here is just huge. SNMJP serves, what, an average of 41.7 million people every single month.
Yeah, I mean, just to grasp that scale,
Hmm.
that's roughly 1 in 8 Americans relying on this program. It's fundamental.
And the benefit amount.
The average is about $187.20 per person per month, which, breaks down to just about $6 a day.
$6 a day.
Well, it's the absolute foundational safety net for many. And then you've got WIC alongside that, helping nearly 7 million women, infants, and children.
So this technical pause, this administrative hold, that's why we're seeing these urgent warnings popping up from different states now.
Exactly. The deadlines vary because each state needs a different amount of lead time administratively. Texas, for example, they warned that November SNFE benefits just won't be issued if the shutdown goes past October 27th. And Pennsylvania, they said benefits would effectively stop being paid after October 16th, basically, until the shutdown ends. New York's Governor Hochul warned nearly 3 million residents there could lose access.
And there was something particularly worrying in the sources about New Jersey, wasn't there? About funds already on the cards.
Yeah, that adds another layer of anxiety. New Jersey put out a notice saying it's basically unclear if the money that was already loaded onto SNFP cards before October 31st can even be used after November 1st.
Wait, so it might not just be future payments, but money people already have access to.
It suggests the shutdown rules could potentially freeze current unused balances too, depending on how the federal system enforces things. That ambiguity is just devastating for families trying to plan.
Okay, so let's move beyond the technical process then. Let's look at the human impact, the geographic spread of this potential cutoff.
Right, because the sources give us a pretty clear picture of who relies on this and where.
Like in Virginia, nearly 800,000 people are on SNP, and the regional breakdown is stark: over 170,000 in Central Virginia, over 212,000 in Northern Virginia alone.
And Wisconsin warned food aid for 700,000 people would just run out.
Completely.
The variation across states is huge too, isn't it?
Massive. It really highlights how uneven the burden will be. Utah's got the lowest share, about 4.8% of residents on SNAP. But then you look at New Mexico, 21.2%, over a fifth of the state.
So if the system does collapse, some places will feel it much, much harder than others.
Absolutely.
That 41.7 million number, It's almost too big to really comprehend.
Yeah.
But the sources you share had some specific personal stories that really bring that $6 a day figure into sharp focus. This is where it gets real.
Yeah, they do. We heard from Ariel Robinson in Richmond. She's a mother of 4, just started a new job, but still really depends on SNIP to make ends meet.
And she talked about how previously, when funds got tight, she had to rely on her church's after-school program just so her kids could get fed. For her, SNIP isn't extra. It's budgeted right alongside rent and utilities. Every dollar counts.
And then there was Audrey Cunningham in Tazewell County. Mother of 3, relies on SNIP and WIC. Her income doing Walmart deliveries just stopped because her van broke down.
Yeah, and her situation really shows the awful choices families are facing right now, just anticipating November. She said they're already stocking up on cheaper, less healthy stuff, ramen soups, because they have to brace for maybe 0 benefits next month.
That's heartbreaking. And thinking about Keisha Kane, the caregiver. Her uncle is 65, diabetic, had a stroke.
And his SNP benefit, $291 a month, is literally his only income while he's waiting on disability approval. For people like him, SNP isn't supplemental anything. It's everything.
It's their entire lifeline.
Exactly. So, okay, the need is obviously urgent, desperate even. Let's pivot to the gridlock. What solutions are actually on the table? Why are we heading for this cliff if maybe the resources are there?
Right. This is where that policy choice idea really comes into play. Advocates, experts, they're pointing straight at the USDA's contingency fund.
Okay, and how much is in there?
Estimates are between, say, $5 billion and $6 billion. Now, context is key here. SNP costs about $8 billion a month, nationally.
Okay, so not enough for a full month.
No, but enough to cover the first couple of weeks, maybe 3. Enough to get that critical first-of-the-month distribution out. It buys time, basically, for Congress to figure things out.
And some experts argue the administration actually has to use it.
Yeah, legal experts like Sharon Parrott at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, they argue the administration is legally required to tap into those contingency funds for November benefits.
And we have seen administrations find workarounds before,
Yeah.
right? During shutdowns?
Absolutely. In the 2018-2019 shutdown, they actually dispersed funds early using various administrative tools precisely to avoid a gap like this one. So the question becomes, why not now?
And there's a specific recent precedent with WIC too, isn't there?
Yes, that's crucial. The sources highlight that just this month, October, the Trump administration used discretionary authority. They moved about $300 million in tariff revenue to fund WIC.
So advocates are basically saying, do that again. Use similar authority, or the contingency fund, to cover November SNAP. The mechanism exists.
Which brings us right into the thick of the politics. Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, a Democrat, was quoted hitting out at the administration, pointing to a big bailout announced for Argentina's president, while American families are facing hunger. Her point being, the resources seem to be allocatable elsewhere.
And she also mentioned her bill, the Feed Our Families Act.
Yeah, designed to guarantee benefits for 3 months post-shutdown, but it's blocked by House Republican leadership, according to the sources.
And then you see the pushback, the other side.
Mm-hmm.
A USDA spokesperson called this whole situation an inflection point for Democrats, trying to link it to their push for extending Affordable Care Act subsidies.
So using the potential hunger crisis as leverage for unrelated political goals?
It certainly looks that way. Both sides seem to be using it to try and extract concessions on other issues.
Is that spokesperson really suggesting that feeding 41 million people is somehow less urgent than arguing about healthcare subsidies, or is that just deflection?
It feels like political deflection, aiming for leverage. But, whoever is leveraging whom, the point made by the Food Research and Action Center seems key, because the USDA does have money available, even if it's not the full $8 billion.
It becomes a choice.
It becomes a policy choice about whether or not to prioritize stopping families from going hungry right now.
And while Washington is arguing about funds and optics, the immediate pressure cooker is at the local level, right? The food banks, the pantries.
Absolutely. They're supposed to be the next line of defense, but they're facing what the sources called a double whammy.
Okay, break that down. What's the first whammy?
Just overwhelming demand. Food pantries were already stretched thin, serving more people now than even before COVID hit. They're saying point blank they aren't confident they can handle the surge if SNAP just stocks. Experts from places like the Greater Chicago Food Depository said they're basically at max capacity already.
And the second whammy makes it even worse.
Yeah, it's a financial hit to them directly. A lot of these local nonprofits rely on federal grants for their own operations, keeping the lights on, paying staff. And that funding is also held up by the shutdown.
Oh, wow. So they're expected to suddenly handle a national food crisis while their own operational budgets are being cut off simultaneously.
Exactly. It's an impossible situation. Think about the scale mismatch. We heard about the LifeWorks project in Waynesboro, Virginia. They serve over 500 people a month, added 100 new families just since June.
Okay.
Their director said, if SNAP stops, clients who used them for supplemental food before will become completely reliant. One local nonprofit just cannot absorb the needs of 41 million people overnight. It's not feasible.
Which brings us to one more really crucial piece of context here. This funding crisis isn't hitting some robust, flexible safety net, is it? SNAP was already under pressure before this shutdown.
That's such a vital point. Just this past spring, we had the One Big Beautiful Bill Act signed by President Trump, and that fundamentally changed SNAP eligibility.
How so? What did it change?
Well, it got rid of certain exceptions to the work requirements for specific groups of people.
Okay, can you clarify who lost those exceptions?
Sure. We're talking about people like able-bodied adults without dependents, age 55 to 65. Also adults who have dependents age 15 to 18. Their previous exemptions went away. And on top of that, new work requirements were brought in for groups that used to be protected, like veterans, homeless individuals, and young adults, 24 and under, who are leaving foster care.
So the bottom line is the safety net was already being tightened, made less flexible intentionally through recent legislation.
Exactly. The Congressional Budget Office estimated those new work rules would cut about 2.4 million people off SNAP by 2034. The system was already shrinking its reach.
Which makes this sudden funding halt even more dangerous for those who still qualify, who are often the most vulnerable.
Right. The shock hits a system that already has less capacity, less give to absorb it.
So what does this all boil down to for you, the listener, right now? We've got a national food program helping 41 million people, potentially running dry in just days because of an administrative decision, a hold.
And the big debate is whether the administration will use the tools it seems to have, that $5–6 billion contingency fund, the discretionary authority precedence tools that experts insist are legally available, to head off this catastrophe.
And all this is happening, as you said, against the backdrop of a safety net that was already being made smaller, stricter by recent laws.
Overwhelmingly, the sources paint this as a crisis hitting a system under strain. It looks like a policy choice being made in Washington.
But the consequences land squarely on individual families, forcing these awful trade-offs between rent and food. Which leaves us with a really important question for you to think about. When federal aid on this scale gets cut off, especially when the system's already been tightened, how long can the nonprofit sector, the food banks, the charities, how long can they realistically be expected to sustain a crisis that costs billions every single month?
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.